Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains. Welcome to Epic Realms. Today's guest is an author and writer. From comics, books, and magazines to video games and novels, his new book, set in the Tim Burton slash Michael Keaton Batman universe, is titled Batman Resurrection. That comes out in October. Please welcome New York Times bestselling author John Jackson Miller to Epic Realms. How are you doing, John?
I'm doing fine. How are things?
I'm very excited. Your publicist, the people from the publishing company, contacted me. He's like, "Hey, would you be interested in having John Jackson Miller on?" And I was like, "Yes." And before they even went on the spiel, and I was like, "Yes," because I know a lot of your Star Wars stuff, some of the Star Trek stuff. I know you worked in comics. I love comic books.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, "Well, he's got this new Batman book." I'm like, "Double yes." So I was like, this is awesome. This is great. And the more I look at what it is and what it's about, the more
Oh yeah.
excited I am to chat with you about it. But I want to chat with you about you before we even get into that, because a lot of your career has been founded on, because of comic books and around comic books. Where did your passion in comic books kind of begin for you?
Started reading at a very young age, and would have been reading probably Charlie Brown in the newspapers. And got probably my first comic book at age 6. I kept them all. My mother didn't throw them away because she was a grade school librarian. She encouraged me to put them in order, and I kind of kept everything that I ever have, and I have just filing system after filing system, and of course would go on later on to do collection guides for
Yeah.
comics, telling people how to put their own comics in order. But that's where that was, and then almost at the same time, I started drawing my own comics. For many years, just on notebook paper, and I cut it in half. It would be Miller Comics. That was my little line of comics that I wrote, and there were only single copies of anything. And
Yeah.
yeah, I remember at age 9 being really upset when somebody didn't want to read my comics, and I said, this is terrible. I've spent a third of my life so far on comics, and you don't want to read my work. And that's kind of silly sounding, but that came from a 9-year-old. It was like I was already having career angst at age 9. But I had my parents' typewriter, and I was typing. I had a little novel series going, and later on, my dad got a photocopier, and I was actually able to photocopy the stuff that I was doing. And as this is all going on, that's when my comics habit starts maturing, because my first grown-up comic book I got was Star Wars #1 in 1977, and I would go on to continue collecting through the 80s after I discovered the local comic shop.
Yeah.
I found my people more or less when I discovered Comics Buyer's Guide, which was the weekly newspaper that came out from 1971 until I think 2011 or 12. And that was published in Wisconsin, edited at that time by Don and Maggie Thompson, who were sort of the George and Martha Washington of comics fandom. They had been there at the beginning and publishing the first fanzine. And so I was able to follow what was going on in the larger world, of not just comics fandom, but they also covered Star Trek and Star Wars and
Yeah.
other things. And at some point, it was really around the moment when I got on the bus to go to high school, and everybody who had been into comics in junior high or everybody in middle school, dropped it all at once.
Oh
And so
wow.
I get on the bus, and I find out after the summer, I'm wanting to tell people, hey, look at all this stuff I got. I'm ordering comics from Mile High Comics now. I've got all this, this stuff. And my best friend, rest his soul, just passed away here last year. He he'd been my cohort in all things comics, and he's like, well, John, we're in high school now. We don't do that sort of thing
Oh
anymore.
no.
It's all about beer and dating from here and sports. And I'm like, okay, then why don't you let me have your comics?
Yeah.
And he would later on regret having given them to me.
Yeah.
And he would accumulate them again, and then he gave them to me as a wedding gift 10 years after that. So
That's
so
great.
again, but that was kind of what happened, though, is I made that jump from being a casual collector, to being somebody who specialized in this stuff.
Yeah.
I was doing my own fanzine in I guess 10th grade. And then what I was doing is I was doing mini comics, which were these were the web comics of the day. You would draw
Yeah.
your characters and your stories and send them out to other people, usually through the classified ads of Comics Buyer's Guide, or one of the fanzines devoted to those things, like Small
Yeah.
Press Comics Explosion or something like that. These were all magazines that, or just zines that put people in touch with other people who
Yeah.
were
Way
doing this
before
stuff.
eBay, right? Way before eBay.
Yeah, yeah. And so, we're talking about real small audiences, but what it did is it taught me two things. It taught me that I didn't know how to draw, which, was kind of self-evident to anybody who read my stuff. But the drawing taught me how to, lay out a comic book page.
Yeah.
When I was later on writing comics for a living, I already kind of knew, all right, yeah, you can't put too much stuff on a page. There won't be room for it. There won't be
Right.
room for the words. There won't be
You don't
room for
have
the
want to
action.
have a big long script sitting there for one
Yeah,
person.
yeah. And so I kind of had a little bit of solidarity with the artists in the beginning. And over the years, my number of panels per page of my professional comics would continue to go down as I would figure out more and more ways to, fuse things on the page.
Right.
Um, but again, I'm also collecting comics all through that period.
Yeah.
And of course, this is when we kind of have this renaissance in comics, thanks to the comic shops. And that's when we get Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, and
Yeah.
all that other kind of stuff. And so that is sort of where I was. That sets me up kind of to do what I did later. I became the editor of my high school newspaper, in part because I'd already been publishing.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
yeah, and then that led to me doing the same thing in college.
Did your family, you mentioned your mom was a librarian. Do you think
Yeah,
if she was in another kind of a career, do you think that the encouragement might have been a little bit different? Do you think that that is a major
I
part?
do. I do. I mean, a few things. And it wasn't just her, because my dad was, and he was in electronics. He actually did all the car stereo installation repair for all the dealerships in Memphis, Tennessee,
Oh wow.
for like 40 years. And he had introduced me to that line of work. I worked with him in the summers while I was in school. Um, and it wasn't really my bag. My son would have loved it. He's an electrician. But he sort of understood that I was interested in scientific things, but not actually to use them scientifically. As I was not really interested in inventing or building or fixing. And so he encouraged me. And then my sister, who was 10 years older than I was, and still is, was sort of the third part of this, in that she was into all of the pop culture in the world before I was.
Okay.
So she had introduced me to Monty Python and George Carlin and Steve Martin, and music, and in films, James Bond, and of course, Logan's Run. We get to Star Wars, and she's actually working in a department store in the record section. And one of the things they used to do is, well, actually, they did for everybody. The soundtrack for Star Wars had a poster in it,
Yeah.
by John Berkey, and it was a colossal space battle in front of the Death Star. And John must not have had a lot of information, because there's like three Millennium Falcons in the drawing. But it was but it was wonderful, and it came with the came with the album. The thing is, the shrinkage on those at the store was like 100%.
Yeah.
You know, the even the record store was pulling the posters from those albums, and so she like brought me home three, and I had those.
Nice.
Yeah, and so I sort of had that there. So she was, and then when video games came along, she was you know, making sure I you know, spending her money on cartridges for me, which cost just as much then as they do now.
Right, right.
Even though they're like 4K of RAM on these things, or ROM on these things rather. And so you know, and again, it wasn't. I didn't just have an Atari. I had an Intellivision because that was the intellectual
Right. Yeah. I think I
you know,
had one of
video
those
game
as well.
system.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were snobs about this kind of stuff. So you know, I took all this stuff very seriously, and I think probably the other thing that happened there is my yeah, I went to a school that had classes, you know, sort of accelerated classes for kids that were into you know, you're reading earlier than anybody else and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But what my parents did that instead of having a regular school skip me grades, because I was a little scrawny kid, and I think they figured if I you know, was in a room full of fifth graders, you know, when I was, you know, 8, yeah, I'd get clobbered. And so what ends up happening is I get sort of a lower pressure um you know, childhood,
Yeah.
where you know, I was never really a grind trying to become valedictorian or anything like that, and I wasn't. Um, you know, but I was allowed to pursue the things I was interested in, and yeah, excel in things that I worked hard at. You know, I dedicated my most recent Star Trek novel to three of the teachers from that school, in part because you know, you know, there was one teacher who let me turn in my assignments in comics form
Oh,
because
wow.
she was a fan,
That's
and
great.
so you know, it's not just that I did a comic book version of an Allan Poe story, but I did a comic book version of my characters putting on a production of an Edgar Allan Poe story. So I was already doing this meta stuff, age
Yeah.
14, because I had read all these comics and I understood, okay, yeah, this is how Mad Magazine does this sort of thing. This is
Right.
how, yeah, and so yeah. Anyway, you know, I was definitely lucky to have, you know, that kind of a situation, and that kind of time, and the people that I did, you know, both in you know, school and at home, that were willing to encourage some of these flights of fancy,
Yeah.
and that's one of the reasons that, you know, when I do what I do today, you know, I say that I'm strip mining my childhood for a living, because I've got a lot of readers that didn't have that kind of leisure
Right.
or don't have it now,
Yeah.
um, or or didn't have that kind of support or don't have it now, and you know, I'm just sort of like, well, let me see if I can, you know, take these properties that, you know, we all loved in common, and come up with some extended play versions of these things,
Yeah.
so you guys can have some fun.
Talking about those IPs, so you've done, you know, you mentioned some of the IPs. You mentioned Star Wars, Star Trek. Obviously, we talked about Batman. We're going to talk about Batman a little bit later. You talk
Yeah.
about all these IPs that you kind of grew up with. Are there any IPs that you grew up with that you haven't gotten to do anything with that you're like, man, I really want to get my hands on that and write a book on, you know, that IP?
Um, you know, I've been at it for long enough that pretty much just about everything that I had been interested in doing that I figured was commercially viable, you know, I've been able to do. You know, one of the ones that you didn't mention, I did about 6 years ago. I wrote the 40th anniversary comic series for Battlestar Galactica,
Nice.
which, to my knowledge, it's the last Galactica series that's been done to date, based on the original series. Maybe there's something else out there, but basically, that was done something as a labor of love because you kind of knew that there's only so much of an audience. I was working on the series and I realized that I was the only person working on the comic book that was alive when the show was on. Uh,
Wow.
and so I ended up having to help the artists and help the editor and help the colorists make sure we got everything right, which I was happy to do.
Yeah.
But most of the things where I say, okay, this is something I was really a huge fan of. I either have been there and done that, or I kind of know that there's no market for it. I've said many times, for years I would said I'd love to do something for Max Headroom, and the thing is, the more I looked at it, the more I said, that's a TV show about TV,
Yeah.
and there's and this is the British TV series that turned into an American sci-fi series,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure you could actually do it in prose or in comics, and that's why there's never been a novel or a comic book for it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Batman completely shocked me because uh, I would have said that the Tim Burton Batman was on my wish list if I had thought that that was a thing that you could actually do.
Yeah.
And I've written about this that it's a dream project that I never even dreamed you could ask for,
Right.
because it wasn't the case long ago, where you could sublicense or zero in on just a particular version of something like that.
Yeah.
And we're fortunate that we live in a world where we've had you know things like the Batman 66 comics that kind of set this all up over a decade ago.
Right.
I remember asking the editor at DC, who was in charge of this at the time, "Hey, you guys, if you ever do Batman '89 comics, you should let me know." And he was like, "Yeah, you're like the 50th person who's asked us this." And I knew I wasn't anywhere on that list, even though I had done Iron Man years earlier, and I was doing Star Wars comics at the time.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, I kind of get it.
No reason not
But
to ask. What's the worst that happens? They say no.
yeah, yeah, that's what. And so and so really what happened here is, I'm in the middle of writing my most recent Star Wars novel, The Living Force, and my editor Tom Holler said, you saw Batman 12 times, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah, and I kept the tickets." Uh,
Nice. For those listening, he's showing
we're
us the
talking about
tickets. FYI.
we're talking about 12 times in the theater. And he said, we have the chance to do books, in this realm, and tying in specifically to Batman '89. And this is in part, I think, made possible because of the huge enduring fandom of those films.
Right.
Also, you've got Michael Keaton back in The Flash.
Right.
This is even before we get uh, the concert series going around for the not TV show, for the movie, the symphony series
Yeah.
for it. And it's before Michael Keaton riffs with Danny DeVito and Arnold
That was
Schwarzenegger
great,
on
by the way.
stage.
Those that missed it, go check that one out.
Yeah, but see that, and it's like, okay, well, this is kind of coming back, and we also have at the time, DC has done Superman 78 comics and Batman 89 comics by Sam Hamm, one of the two screenwriters of the film, and Joe Quinones, who had drawn covers for my Star Wars Knight Errant series years ago. And so, and so the way is sort of paved for us to do something. And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And I'll make time for it, and we'll go from there.
That's awesome. Going back to your earlier years, tell us about your decision for college. You went into college journalism, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
What was your
Not
decision making for that to go? I'm going to do journalism, and this is what I'm going to
yeah.
do. And how much did that
Well,
affect
actually,
you overall?
actually, I went for astronautical engineering was the intention.
Okay.
Because I'd done the publishing thing, self-publishing thing and everything, just long enough to realize this is not a way to make a lot of money. But also this is a very insular job. Unless I were to go out and be a sports reporter or something like that, I'm going to be indoors and huddled over a computer as things were beginning to turn to all this time. And that as we were approaching when I'm graduating high school, Halley's Comet was coming back, and I'd been reading science fiction. Arthur C. Clarke was my favorite writer at the time, and he was an active scientist. He, basically discovered the geosynchronous orbit. The Clarke Belt is the group of satellites that are up there at geosynchronous orbit. I had really become obsessed with the movie 2010, which had realistic science to a degree, and also had this notion that one day in the future we'll be working with the Russians in space. So I better learn Russian, and also it would be good to actually know how to build a spaceship or something like that. And so yeah, and so that was kind of like, well, all right, that's what I'll take a shot at. And yeah, a few things happened in sequence. And my dad was like, yeah, are you sure this is what you want to do? We'll find out. And a few things happened in sequence. One is, unfortunately, January of my senior year, the Challenger blows up.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I had already planned to go to, everybody else was on the senior cruise. I was going to be doing a swing around the Gulf states with my recently departed friend, and one of our stops was going to be Cape Canaveral. And when I got down there, because we went anyway, it was pretty somber because you couldn't see anything. They weren't letting you out of the tour vehicle.
Yeah.
They were still piecing together the debris in the vehicle assembly building, in the giant building out there. And so it was pretty somber. So I got that sort of happening, to sort of make this feel like, okay, this is going to take a lot longer because they put the shuttle program on hold. They put everything on hold. Um, and I get to college and I make the mistake of testing into honors calculus. And that was my Waterloo. I was like, okay, I can't do this at all. I don't even understand what we're doing.
Yeah.
I need a story problem. I need, explanation. I need logic. I'm great with statistics because statistics I can usually turn into
Yeah.
I can understand why I'm doing it. But with this, I reached my limit,
Yeah.
fairly quickly, and basically threw myself on the steps of the communications building and said, "Yeah, please take me in your journalism department." I did keep on with the Russian language, and that resulted in me getting after college. I got a master's degree in Soviet studies. Did not get a doctorate because the Soviet Union collapsed on my dissertation. It was again big historical timing.
Yeah.
Um, I was on my way from Russian language immersion camp at Indiana University because I was going to go over and do my doctoral dissertation
Yeah.
uh, based on studying stuff overseas. I got my passport, I gotten everything, and I get there, or I'm on my way back from immersion camp, and I find out on the radio that Mikhail Gorbachev has been taken hostage by his own generals, his own Politburo, and as a consequence of that coup fails. but as a consequence of it, everything that I was studying would be gone within a year and a half.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, I'm not a historian. I don't want to study what happened in the past. This thing is in the realm of the journalists now, and I've already found out that I don't speak the language well enough to not starve,
Yeah.
to order food. And so I that's when I decided, okay, I'm gonna go use the journalism degree that I did get, and start editing magazines.
Okay.
This skips over Batman, but and that part of it, but I'm sure we can come back to it.
We are going to come back to Batman for sure. We're going to, I want to make sure we get it closer to the end so it's fresh in everybody's mind at the end of the
Sure,
show.
sure.
For sure. Was there anything you learned that kind of stands out to you in your college time? And is there anything
Um,
that you still use to this day?
well, I mean, we mentioned the Russian stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I used the what I had from my studies of the Soviet Union in my novels about Star Wars. So I've got a novel called Star Wars: A New Dawn, which is about how the Empire is transforming the Republic. And the time frame in which the Empire has to turn the Republic from what it was into this totalitarian machine is 20 years, about the same amount of time that this country takes to go from an agrarian society to this totalitarian industrialist society, at the cost of tens of millions of lives.
Yeah.
And so I was able to insert some elements in there, dealing with some of the tensions of changing these institutions over. I had a character, Count Vidian in that book, who represented somebody who was like, okay, let's just not nationalize all the industries. Let's get them to work for us and compete with one another. And the emperor's like, okay, sure, whatever's gonna work. I had done that again in my first Star Wars novel, called Star Wars Knight Errant, where I wrote both the novel and the comic series for it. And that was another case where it was about it set a generation before the rule of two kicks in. And so there's lots of Sith Lords. They have lots of fiefdoms, and they're battling one another about what it means to be Sith. And the Jedi have sort of thrown up their hands, except for this one Jedi operative who is the star of the series. And that's something where I again drew on that history because, again, during the time of the Communist International, there were multiple different countries that had gone communist in one way or another. And that's the thing, it was all different ways. As it was practiced in Cuba was not the same way as Vietnam, as China, as Russia. And in fact, sometimes these countries would be in conflict. And I said, okay, well, this is how it's going to work here is these Sith Lords are all going to be battling one another over what it means to be Sith and what they believe is to use a revolutionary word, what is the program that's going to get us
Yeah.
to control of this galaxy. And of course, as it turns out, the rule of two is part of what they need, and in the case of the Sith. And then what they need is they need to hijack an existing government, which is what the Emperor does.
Right.
But I had looked at that as well in a series I did called Lost Tribe of the Sith, where it's the conclusion is the only way that you can actually survive as a Sith government is to find some way of restraining all these ambitions and get everybody on the same page. And every one of these series that I did was like a little different petri dish
Yeah.
that I took elements from world history, And then I would just sort of mix them up with whatever we had in Star Wars or whatever the circumstances were.
Yeah.
And then, doing it in Star Trek was a little bit easier because in Star Trek, there actually was an Earth. There
Yeah,
actually
yeah. There's still a
was.
reference point.
Yeah, I could actually refer to Benjamin Franklin or somebody like that without having to imagine a fake alien version of that person. Well, as such and such from Corellia said. Um, and so I'm doing that. But anyway, yeah, every one of these was just sort of a different project that allowed me to explore some things. And I'm really happy that Knight Errant series, both the comics and the novel, they are both out again. The comics from Marvel in a big epic collection, the for the called Old Republic Volume 5, and then the novel is out in a new special edition from Random House. And so
That's awesome.
people finally have that whole thing again to be able to
Get
read
them
it.
all together at once. Something that you're kind of known for in a lot of these is not not messing up what canon already exists. And I'm
Yeah,
kind of curious what your process is in your research. So when you're going back and you're making a Batman movie and you're like, okay,
yeah,
here's the historical reference, here's these other movies, or something like Star Wars, where there's
yeah,
novels, there's comic books, there's movies, there's specialty editions,
yeah.
all of these things, and trying to not contradict
Right.
things that have already happened. What is your process like to make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, so every one of these projects, almost everything I've done, with the exception of I think one book, is a licensed product, and the license there is the key because that means in every one of these cases there's a licensor, somebody who owns Star Wars, Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, a studio that will define for you what is the relevant source material and that you have to care about. And what other things are in motion that you might have to be contending with because there are other stories, there are other
Yeah,
ships on the sea, there are other things that are out there that you could collide with if you didn't or what are the limits on what kinds of stories you could tell that you don't end up taking um ideas from somebody else someday or you don't want to do a line of dialogue that one or not dialogue but a line of narration that in what that one line prevents another whole series from happening
yeah,
because you had to say that there had never been a Wookiee on this planet.
right.
Never is a terrible word. The any absolutes like that, you using narration at all is bad. Usually because the narrator is the voice of God. There's only one narrator in Star Wars where it's a history that is incontrovertible. It's only in one place. Where is it? It's the opening crawl. The
Yeah,
opening crawl is the history, but everything else, Obi-Wan Kenobi says, for 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights protected peace and order in the galaxy. Well, he might have been exaggerating. He might have been incorrect. He might have been drunk. He might have been lying.
right.
Would Obi-Wan Kenobi lie to Luke Skywalker? Yeah, he's done it before.
Yeah.
Uh, or he would do
Darth
it
Vader
later.
killed your father.
Yeah. So again, I try to blame the speaker as much as possible when creating anything that might be considered to be lore. And so what I always try to do is I keep my footprint narrow. My first editor in Star Wars comics, Randy Stradley, he used to say, "When you define, you can find," and that means when you go out and just start explaining things willy nilly and giving the complete history of things, you make it so somebody else can't do a story, and it might be you. And so I'm always keeping track of sort of the footprint of my stories. I am aware of what the source document that I have to work with is. So in something like Batman Resurrection, the main source document are the two films by Tim Burton. And I am, even though I am not obligated though to match up with the adaptation, which is slightly different because it
Yeah.
was based on an earlier draft of the film and has some elements that did not officially happen. um, I have a little fun and I pull ideas here and there. Star Trek, from the adaptation, Star Trek, is a situation where the TV shows and the movies are the source document, and everything else that's added to it, the fans put it on memory beta instead of memory alpha
Yeah.
because it means it's something that is apocryphal. But what I try to do is, if I can write things in such a way that I can wink at or suggest, that these other stories, or leave room for these other stories to still have happened, I'll kind of try to do that.
Okay.
And so, my novel Star Trek Discovery: The Enterprise War deals with the fact that, there have been, in the novels and the comics and everything else, there have been something like 8 or 9 chief engineers of the Enterprise, and so I had a paragraph that kind of, like, yeah, we've had a lot of people through here, and we named some names, and does that make them canonical? Not necessarily. At least the Star Trek stuff now is more, I call it canon adjacent, because we are working with Kirsten Beyer, who is executive producer on Strange New Worlds, and
Okay.
is in the writers' room of these other shows.
Okay.
And so she coordinates with us. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, I try to make all accounts correct if I can, and I try not to overwrite things if I don't have to. But again, it is, the case that I am following the directive of, that I'm receiving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, for example, when I wrote The Living Force for Star Wars, my most recent novel, which is a Jedi Council novel,
Yeah.
um,
Which just came out last
and
April, right? Just came
came
out.
out in April. First novel featuring the entire council. Qui-Gon Jinn basically tells the members of the council to go out and touch grass. You, we says, when was the last time you guys actually helped anybody? You sit in this room. You ignore one another. You send poor Uriel Poof out to get pizza. You let anybody talk. And so I wrote this story that was intended to be set 1 year before Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
And I had significant leeway, latitude about what to write about. But I knew that in so doing, I would be telling the first official stories that would be, needing to contend with the fact that we had characters that had been given histories temporarily that became no longer operative because of George Lucas himself.
Yeah.
So, there had been, these members of the council had been given backstories in, I think, the Star Wars Visual Dictionary, that then, or Phantom Menace Visual Dictionary, that then got picked up in the Dark Horse comics, or they started in the Dark Horse comics and went over. And
Yeah.
we get things like Qui-Gon Jinn, not Qui-Gon, Kiadi Mundi having
Yes.
5 wives, and other characters
I was trying to figure out that name
having
all day. I keep seeing the pictures of that character. I was like, what was his name? I can't
yeah,
remember. Thank you.
Kiadi, yeah, and then we've got characters that, it's clear from the previous stories, Evan Peel, that he was recruited much older and he grew up on a war-torn planet. That that uh, uh, the Depa Balaba, the master of later on of Kanan Jarrus, that she also had grown up on a war-torn planet and was rescued by Mace Windu and recruited, but she was quite more advanced along age-wise than we found out with the second prequel, where now the notion is, okay, yeah, everybody is inducted into the Jedi Order as children, pretty much no exceptions. And also there's no dating, so sorry, Kiadi. That's gone. And so I figured out ways to still sort of reflect this. I mean, Mace is still Depa's master. I still have the notion that she came from a war-torn area, or that her planet was. Both her and Evan Peel, I established that, even though Evan did not grow up on this planet, he went back later and he felt as if he had grown up there.
Yeah.
And so, this is stuff that kind of, I think, is not obligatory to my job. It's not something I have to do. But if I can figure out a way to do it, it's fun.
Awesome. It was really great because I was about to move into that story, the Living Force, and ask you a little bit about it, and like you went right into it. You read my mind.
Well, and this all goes back to that reporting thing, which is like I kind of know what the questions are before.
Right.
The journalism thing.
So yeah, guys, everybody watching, listening to the podcast, make sure to go check out The Living Force. Came out in April, and of course, the main reason that you're here is over your shoulder. It's Batman, and I didn't write down, like, I have notes, I have little things here that I write down and do. Okay, this is what I'm gonna do. And for this, I was like, I don't need to write notes about the Michael Keaton, Tim Burton universe, because I could talk about that for hours and not need any notes. And I know you were a big fan as well. You watch it so many times in the theater. So like, we could probably sit here and make a whole show just talking about the Keaton versus Batman. So when you're putting this together, did you do any other inspirational things beforehand? Did you like watch the Michael Keaton interviews or watch Tim Burton interviews about it or anything like that? Go back, watch the original movie?
Well, the thing is, I won't get. I've done a lot of podcasts talking about the importance of the Batman movie and how it changed, movies and the people's impression of comics and as comic book movies. And how that film in 1989 was a watershed, for everyone. The reason it hit so hard for me is because it did make Batman no longer a comic figure as he had been, and by comic I mean comedic figure,
right?
As he had been to people who watched him on TV,
the Adam
but
West.
not to people who've been reading the comics, because people who've been reading the comic books knew, okay, no, this is much more serious stuff. We've got this. And so I assigned myself. I was editing the campus newspaper at the University of Tennessee. I was there for the summer. We were publishing just two issues a week, so I had plenty of time. And I said, okay, I'm just going to assign myself movie reviews, and I assigned myself the review for Batman. And again, I was bowled over by it. It was a great experience.
I love it. You still have it. That's great.
Still have it. And again, I ended up going 12 times over. It was 11 times in '89, and then I went to go see it at a big, in a giant old style Orpheum theater, opera house kind of thing the following year. And it was again, it was a transformative thing for cinema, transformative thing for me, in that I'm like, all right, this is something where this is the first time I've committed a movie to memory right away, because when Star Wars came out, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, I didn't have a car. We didn't have Star Wars doesn't turn up on TV until February of, I think, '83 on HBO. And the DVD VHS era, these things were not around. You could not relive these things and memorize all these moments. It's one of the reasons that these books were actually, that adaptations were actually so valued at the time, because that was the only way, those and then the tie-ins that people would write to give you a chance to continue reliving these things. Um, Now, Batman is different in my case because I'm able to go back to the theater and memorize this thing,
Right.
and then also Batman changes the whole videotape business,
Yeah.
because that VHS comes out in November, and which is just 5 months after it came out, at a reasonable price.
Yeah.
People below a certain age are not going to know that when videos would go to Blockbuster or whatever, uh, half the time those videos cost several $100s. Or if you wanted to buy your own copy of it, it would be like 99,
Right.
because the idea was to prop up the video stores. But Batman comes out really soon, and it's like $20.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so again, I had absorbed all of this, and I had all the merch. I had, or not all of it. Nobody can have all of it. I do have the Taco Bell cup, uh,
Nice.
which, but it's got a hole in it now. But that's okay. Uh, but again, so when it comes time to write the novel, I'm fairly sure I've got all the lines
Yeah.
memorized.
Yeah.
And not only that, but I have a plot already, because even in my review, I had questions. I had questions about how certain things transpired in the film and what might happen next.
Yeah.
And so when we were talking about doing the novel, I said, okay, tell you what, the Sam Hamm and Joe Quinones are already doing these comics, which are set over a year after um, Batman Returns. In fact, they've advanced further since then. I said, let me just go hug the first movie. Let me be right there, nested in between the two movies and fairly early in that stretch. So we're still dealing with the aftermath of the Joker
Yeah.
and the echo of him, and you know the questions that would come from both Alfred and Vicky Vale of, Joker's gone. He, in the movie verse, he killed your parents. Aren't you done? Aren't you through? Is that not the end of your arc?
Yeah.
Can't you hang it up? And that's one of the things that I wanted to tackle in here, and we do. And so, I was able to write this basically as a thought experiment. What if there had been a tie-in novel that came out for Christmas '89, that was written with a full knowledge of what was going to be in the first film and a full knowledge of what was going to be in the second film, which
Okay.
obviously would have been impossible then.
Yeah.
And so that's how I. But this is what's fun, is people who are reading this stuff years from now, who might not know what year things came out.
Yeah. They might read it and be like, "Oh man, this is
That thing
great."
happens all the time. I mean, because people, books are collected and things in different orders, and I've got Horatio Hornblower novels back here from C.S. Forrester, that he wrote completely out of order, and yet you're supposed to read them, or at least people do read them, numerically.
Yeah.
It's the Star Wars viewing order thing. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. What? That's and so yeah, it's a fun little experiment. And as I'm writing this, and this gets back to your original question, which is, what did I have to do? Well, I didn't really need to refresh my memory about the dialogue, except where I exactly quoted it. Although really, then I kind of had it.
Right.
I needed to actually. There were a couple of things. There's a one of the Joker's henchmen from the original movie. I wanted to make sure he was still alive,
Okay.
because I knew Bob wasn't.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
but I give nothing away by saying that the only other henchman that has a name in that picture, I'm sure you might be able to guess. If it's not Bob, who is it? It's
Oh.
Lawrence. It's Lawrence, the guy with the boombox.
Right. Right. I
That's the
mostly
only other
remember the name from the song because he's in the
video.
song on the soundtrack.
Oh yeah, Lawrence. Yeah.
Lawrence. Yep.
Well, He never
And
says
I
a
always
word.
thought it was Florence with an F, not
No. Yeah,
because as a kid, sometimes you hear things
oh,
wrong.
there you go. No, that's how that happens. Well, Lawrence never says a word in the movie. But I'm like, okay, this is somebody who is instantly recognizable. This is somebody who everybody will know.
Yeah.
And I just needed to go back and make sure he lives, because he goes through the floor of the belfry of Gotham Cathedral, and I'm like, okay, I just make sure that we can at least pretend that there's a floor underneath there,
Yeah.
a second floor, because we know that the boxer goes down the middle of the tower, and he definitely croaks.
Yeah.
That's not good. Uh, but I once I had that and I knew that, we get to the only real research that I've got to do, and that is something that I haven't had to do on Star Wars or Star Trek. I got to figure out how stuff works on Earth in the modern day.
Yeah.
So,
And by modern day, you mean
somebody
the 80s and 90s.
89 or whatever. Yeah, I mean, if I'm writing in Star Wars and somebody gets injured or something like that, well, they just call out the droid.
Yeah.
Or in Star Trek, they send you down to the med bay,
Yeah.
and you don't have to know any anatomy. I had moments with what are firefighting techniques like? How are autopsies performed? Where did the police do this? How did they do that? How much? The one excerpt that we've got online, which is on Polygon.com right now, which reveals our villain, or one of our villains. And it's a fun reveal, so I'll have people go there and actually read it.
Go to
Uh,
Polygon, guys.
yeah, the links on my Twitter feed. The thing is, the it, there's a moment that involves me having to know how much a traffic signal weighs, and I'm like, okay, this particular traffic signal in 1989 would weigh 50 pounds.
Okay.
And then I have to sort of, whatever I'm doing, I got to fit it to the time frame. And so yeah, this is one of the things that I do, is I have to do my research within the universe, and then have to do research in real life. And if I'm gonna do something in the universe that is unusual, I need to, going back to your earlier question about the guidance that we're given and what we're allowed to do, I need to make sure it fits with what we've seen on screen.
Yeah.
I'll give it away, since it's given away in the headline on Polygon. We do a Burtonized version of, or what I feel would be a Burtonized version of Clayface, as
Which
one
is
of the, as
exciting.
one of the characters, which is exciting. And it is not the case that he is the shambling, dripping mound that you see in the comics, because we don't see anything like that in the first two movies.
Right.
The first two movies, there's not any metahuman stuff going on, other than people who have unfortunate, situations like the Penguin,
Yeah.
or we do see some pretty out there stuff with how Smilex works,
Right.
and how quickly it works. And so when I'm doing things, I'm like, okay, I can plug into this. We're almost like lawyers. We've got to cite a case.
Yeah.
We've got to say, okay, if I'm going to do this, here's the moment on screen that allows this to happen. And I was doing this with Star Wars and Star Trek. If in Lost Tribe of the Sith, I had a question: can somebody influence a mind of a person that he doesn't know the language of? And I'm like, yeah, Luke Skywalker does it with Bib Fortuna at the opening of Return of the Jedi. Star Trek. Can a cloaked ship beam somebody aboard? And I'm like, yeah, in Star Trek 4 in Golden Gate Park, they beam characters on and off the ship.
Right.
And that's kind of what I'm doing here. Is I'm matching things. Um, Technology. Batman has the best technology.
Right.
And then sort of the characters of name have slightly better technology. They're slightly I view them as sort of living in a they're the titans walking around in these things, both of fashion and other things. Yeah, we've got Vicky Vale living in an apartment which is very modern and cool looking. We see Alexander Knox with a tape recorder, a handheld tape recorder. But at the same time, your sedans that everybody's driving are moving back towards the 40s.
Yeah.
Everybody's wearing, everybody's got that going on. And, it's like, I don't have to explain it. I just have to rhyme with it.
Yeah.
And so this is actually sort of the fun of doing it. Is I've got to try to find a way to have people look at it and say, not only does that sound like this particular character, but it feels like what a story set there would feel like.
Yeah, that's great. I'm looking super forward to the book. I'm very excited for it. Like I said, I'm a big fan, and yeah, just super looking forward to it, to see what you put out there. And I'm curious to see how you tie in the middle parts of the movies as well, because I went and saw the second one so many times as well. So right there with you. So I'm a big fan. Love it. People can come and find you coming up, right? You're going to be at Barnes & Noble in Appleton. Wisconsin on October 15th.
Yep.
And be at New York City Comic Con October 17th through the 20th. Couple other Barnes & Noble locations: Chicago, Illinois, October 25th, Joliet, Illinois, October 26th, Oswego, Illinois, October 26th, and you're coming to Twin Cities Con November 8th through 9th. I'm gonna have to look you up when you come into town and visit and say hi and introduce myself in reality, as it were. So
no, that's all coming up.
It's all coming up. So I hope you have safe trips on all of that. People that are listening to this, you guys can go and check them out. Anybody that's in the live stream chat, please stick around. We will get to your live stream questions. Make sure to throw them in the chat. If you want to check out John on social media, he's on Instagram at John Jackson Miller, and also on Facebook /John Jackson Miller, or on X or Twitter as at JJM Faraway. So you can catch him at all of those locations.
JJM Faraway.
Faraway.
Yeah,
I knew I had to get by with one mistake at some point tonight. It would happen. It was going to happen. Bound to happen.
There probably is a JJM Fairway, but he's a better golfer than I am. So go far away, as in far away.
Far away, in a galaxy far away. Guys, coming up, we're going to be joined down the road here by author and game designer Jedediah Barry. He's going to be joining us on October 7th. That podcast will be available on the 8th. Also, October 21st, actor and voice actor Mark Meir. You know him as Commander Shepard from Mass Effect, along with so many other tabletop RPG projects. He's an amazing voice actor. He's going to be joining us as well. Also down the road, we're going to have Jennifer Brozek, Leanne Merciel, and Scott Rogers all joining us right here on Epic Realms. So make sure to click the buttons, join, rate, review, follow, subscribe, all of those things. It helps us, and in turn helps our guests. And of course, make sure to go check out Batman Resurrection. That's coming out this October, so you definitely want to get that. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, John Jackson Miller, for joining us, and thank you all for being here at Epic Realms.